The jackhammer died in my hands at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and in that sudden silence, I heard the screaming start downtown. I was 40 feet up on the skeletal frame of what was supposed to become another soulless office building, and from that height, I could see the traffic on Madison Avenue grinding to a chaotic halt. Cars mounted sidewalks, a bus slammed into a storefront, people scattered like insects fleeing poison, but some of them weren't running away. They were chasing. My foreman instincts kicked in before my brain could process the wrongness. I hit the radio clipped to my vest. All crew, this is Hayes. Everyone down from elevation. Now, not a drill. Static crackled back, then Tommy's voice from ground level. Boss, you seeing this? Something's wrong with people down the street. Real wrong. I was already moving toward the construction elevator, my boots clanging on exposed I-beams. The job site sprawled across 2 full city blocks, a massive commercial complex development that was 3 months into an 18-month build. We had everything here. 3 excavators, 2 bulldozers, a 40-ton crane, cement mixers, generators big enough to power a small neighborhood. Pallets of rebar stacked like giant Lincoln logs, enough plywood and steel sheeting to build a dozen houses. Mountains of gravel and sand. A temporary fence surrounded the perimeter, flimsy chain link that was meant to keep out curious kids and liability lawyers, not whatever was causing that screaming to spread like wildfire through the streets beyond. The elevator cage rattled down, 12 seconds that felt like 12 minutes. My crew was already gathering near the trailer cluster, 17 men total, including me. Good guys, most of them. I'd worked with Tommy for 6 years across 4 different sites. Marcus ran the heavy equipment with the precision of a surgeon. Big Czech guy named Pavel could weld anything to anything. Young kid. Couldn't have been more than 22. Everyone called him Sketch because he was always drawing building designs in the dirt during breaks. Lock the gates, I said, hitting the ground. Someone tell me what we're looking at. Marcus pointed toward the main street entrance. A woman in a business suit staggered past our fence line, and at first I thought she was drunk. That loose-limbed stumble, the way her head lolled. Then she lunged at a man trying to help her, and her teeth found his throat before he could pull away. Blood sprayed across the sidewalk in a pattern I knew I'd never unsee. Jesus Christ, someone whispered behind me. More of them appeared, shambling, running, crawling. Their movements were all wrong, joints bending at angles that made my spine hurt just watching. Some were covered in blood. Others looked almost normal except for their eyes, which had gone milky white like spoiled eggs. They fell on anyone they caught with a hunger that wasn't metaphorical. Tommy ran toward the gate, reaching for the chain and padlock. A man in a security guard uniform grabbed the chain link from the outside, shaking it violently, fingers threading through the metal diamonds. His face was chewed halfway off, but he didn't seem to notice or care. Tommy stumbled backward, and I caught his shoulder. Different lock plan, I said. Get the loader. We're blocking this entrance with something heavier than a padlock. If you've ever watched your normal world dissolve into nightmare in under 5 minutes, you'll understand why I didn't ask questions right then. I just moved. Keep watching and hit that subscribe button, because what we built next saved our lives. Pavel was already climbing into the nearest front-end loader, a beast of a machine with a bucket that could scoop 2 tons of earth. He fired it up, black diesel smoke coughing from the exhaust. The hydraulics whined as he lifted the bucket and drove toward the main gate. Outside, more of those things were gathering, drawn by our movement and noise. Maybe 20 of them now, pressing against the fence. Back up, I shouted to the crew still standing near the entrance. Give him room. Pavel positioned the loader perpendicular to the gate, then dropped the bucket. It hit the ground with a slam that I felt through my boots. He killed the engine and hopped down. That'll hold for now. But boss, that fence won't stop them if enough push. He was right. I could already see the chain link bowing inward where the crowd pressed thickest. These things didn't have strategy, but they had numbers, and numbers plus mindless persistence would eventually overcome our flimsy perimeter. I turned to face my crew, 17 pairs of eyes locked on me, looking for answers I didn't have. Some were scared, some looked ready to bolt. Marcus kept his expression neutral, waiting. Tommy was checking his phone, swearing under his breath. "No signal," he said. "Not even emergency calls going through." "Same here," said Sketch, holding up his phone. Last thing I saw on Twitter before it died was something about attacks spreading across the whole downtown area, people calling it an infection. Infection. The word hung in the air like gas fumes. I thought about that woman's teeth finding flesh, the blood spray, the way her victim would probably stand up in a few minutes looking for his own meal. "Options," I said, keeping my voice level. "We can try to leave, make a run for our vehicles in the parking area and hope we get somewhere safer. Or we can stay here and figure out how to make this site defensible." Defensible? That was Jake, a pipe fitter with 2 kids at home. "This is a construction site, not a fort. We've got some tools and a fence that's already failing." "We've got more than tools," Marcus said quietly. His eyes were scanning the site, and I could see the same thing I was seeing, the inventory of survival. "We've got heavy machinery, building materials, power generation, water lines already run to the site, that storage container full of supplies. My family's out there," Jake said, voice rising. "My kids are at school 15 blocks from here." Others murmured agreement. Several guys had family they wanted to reach. I got it. Every instinct said to go, to run, to find the people you loved. But I'd also seen what was happening beyond our fence, and I knew traffic was gridlocked, which meant vehicles were death traps. On foot through streets full of those things, suicide. "Here's what I know," I said. "Right now we're safe. We've got walls, even if they're not great. We've got resources. Out there?" I gestured toward the street where screaming continued in waves. "Out there is chaos, and you'll be on foot once you hit that traffic jam 3 blocks down. I'm not ordering anyone to stay, but I am saying that if we work together, we can make this place survivable, maybe long enough for help to arrive. Maybe longer." Silence stretched out. Someone's radio crackled with static, and a distorted voice that might have been an emergency broadcast, but the words were unintelligible. Finally, Tommy spoke. "I live alone. Got nobody waiting. I'm staying." "Same," said Marcus. Pavel nodded. "My brother is in Baltimore. Either he's dealing with same shit or he's fine. Nothing I can do from here." One by one, others committed. Some reluctantly, some with the hollow look of people who'd already done the math and knew the odds in the end. 12 stayed. 5 left, including Jake, climbing into a pickup truck and disappearing down the access road, toward uncertainty. I hoped they'd make it. I doubted they would. "Okay," I said to my remaining crew. 12 of us. First priority, secure the perimeter. Second, shelter and supplies. Third, figure out how to survive long enough to see what comes next. Marcus, you're my second. Tommy, inventory our supplies. Food, water, medical, everything. Pavel, I need you to assess what we can build with what we've got. Sketch, you're with him. Rest of you, we're reinforcing this fence before dark." We moved. When you've spent years on job sites, you learn that action beats panic. Give people tasks, keep them focused, and the fear becomes manageable. We had maybe 3 hours of good daylight left. The fence situation was critical. Our perimeter was roughly rectangular, with the main gate on the south side facing the street. North side backed up against an alley. East and west sides ran along other streets, though the west side was partially blocked by an old brick warehouse slated for demolition. Our project was supposed to incorporate that space eventually. Outside every section of fence, Those things were gathering, not attacking yet, just pressing, reaching, making sounds that weren't quite human anymore. "We need barriers they can't push through," Marcus said, standing beside me and studying the fence line. "The loader blocking the gate is smart, but we need something for the whole perimeter. Concrete barriers. The Jersey barriers we were going to use for traffic control during Phase 2. His face lit up. "We've got 20 of them. 4,000 pounds each. Even if the fence comes down, those things won't be pushing through that much concrete." We had 2 forklifts rated for the weight. Over the next hour, we positioned Jersey barriers along the interior of the fence line, creating a secondary wall. Brutal, tedious work, and every minute we could hear more of those things accumulating outside. Several times, hands reached through the chain link toward whoever was working closest. We learned quickly to stay 3 feet clear. By the time we'd placed the last barrier on the east side, the sun was dropping toward the horizon, painting everything orange and red like the world was already on fire. Tommy found me near the trailer cluster holding a clipboard. "Inventory's done," he said. "We've got the break room fridge, which has maybe 3 days of food if we ration. Sandwiches, leftovers, that kind of thing. Vending machines with chips and candy. 5-gallon water cooler with 6 spare jugs. First aid kit that's pretty basic. Not great, boss." "What about the supply container?" "That's better. Cases of bottled water. Maybe 30 gallons total. Some canned goods that I guess someone was storing. Batteries. Flashlights. Not enough for 12 people long-term, but it gives us a buffer." I nodded, thinking. "The commercial building 2 blocks east. The one we were sourcing plumbing fixtures from. They had a warehouse full of supplies. That's outside the fence. For now. But if we're staying, we need to think about supply runs. Not tonight, though. Tonight we figure out shelter and security." The trailers were obvious shelter. We had 3 of them on site. 2 were office trailers with desks, chairs, windows. One was the break trailer with tables, the fridge, a microwave, and a small bathroom. They weren't fortresses, but they had walls and locks. Pavel approached with sketch in tow. The kid had his ever-present notebook, now filled with sketches. "Boss, we've been thinking about what we can build. Short-term and long-term. Show me." His drawings were crude but clear. Elevated platforms, reinforced walls, what looked like a watchtower. "We've got steel I-beams already staged for the building frame. We could repurpose them, use the crane to lift them into position, create a real wall instead of just fence and barriers. Elevated positions give us visibility and defense." And he hesitated. "Say it," I told him. "We were building something useless, another office complex nobody needs. But now we could build something that matters, a place people could actually survive." The idealism in his voice was almost painful, but he wasn't wrong. I looked at Pavel, who shrugged. "Kid's got vision. It's possible, take time, but possible. We've got the materials and equipment, just need the labor and the plan." "Draw me up something we could start tomorrow," I said. "Tonight, we sleep in shifts. Windows covered in the trailers, doors secured, 2 people on watch at all times, rotating every 2 hours. We keep quiet, we keep the lights minimal, we don't draw attention." The crew gathered near the trailers as twilight deepened. Someone had found a battery-powered radio, and we huddled around it, listening to emergency broadcasts that grew increasingly desperate. Reports of attacks across the entire metro area. Martial law declared. Citizens ordered to remain indoors. Rescue centers being established, though the addresses given were useless to us now. Then the broadcast stopped. Just static and occasional fragments of voices that might have been people or might have been our imagination. Marcus killed the radio. We're on our own. Nobody argued. That first night, sleep came in fragments. I took the first watch with Tommy, both of us positioned on top of the excavator parked near the center of the site. It gave us elevation and a 360 view. The sounds beyond our walls were worse than the daytime chaos, moaning that rose and fell in waves, like wind through trees except organic and hungry. Screams punctuated the darkness, brief and horrible. Fires burned in several directions, orange glows against black sky. "You think anyone's coming?" Tommy asked quietly. "Army, National Guard, somebody?" "Maybe, if they can. If this isn't everywhere." "That's not comforting. Comfort isn't on the menu anymore." He laughed, a single sharp bark. "Fair enough." Around 2 a.m., the fence on the north side started rattling violently. I grabbed the spotlight we'd rigged up, running on battery, and aimed it toward the sound. At least 30 of those things pressed against the chain link, fingers curled through the gaps, pulling and pushing with mindless determination. The fence bowed inward dangerously. "We need to reinforce that section," Tommy said. "Not in the dark. Not with them right there. We'd have to go through the barrier gap to reach the fence." We watched, helpless, as the chain link bent further. Metal screamed. Then one of the posts gave way, snapping at ground level where we'd apparently hit a weak point during installation months ago. A section of fence collapsed inward, falling onto our Jersey barrier line. The things surged forward, climbing over the fallen fence, pressing against the concrete barriers. 4,000 pounds of reinforced concrete didn't budge. They clawed at it, beat against it, but couldn't push through. The barrier held. "Thank Christ for concrete," Tommy muttered. But the fence was compromised. Come daylight, we'd have an open gap unless we fixed it. I made a note to address it first thing, then settled in for the rest of watch, knowing sleep was even less likely now. Dawn came gray and cold. I'd managed maybe 90 minutes of actual sleep, and my body felt like I'd been in a fight. The crew assembled near the brake trailer, faces drawn and exhausted. Nobody had slept well. "North fence is down," I announced, but the barriers held. "First job today. We need to close that gap with something stronger than chain link. Ideas?" "Steel sheeting," Pavel said immediately. "We've got corrugated metal panels for the exterior facade work. We weld them to a frame, anchor it to the barriers. Won't be pretty, but it'll be solid." "How long?" 3 hours, maybe 4. Need to cut panels to size, build the frame, get it in position. "Do it. Marcus, take 3 guys and help him." Rest of us were starting on Sketch's wall plan. The kid's design was ambitious but achievable. Using the crane, we'd lift steel I-beams and set them vertically into the ground along the interior perimeter, creating support columns. Then we'd attach metal sheeting to those columns, building a proper wall 8 feet high. Time-consuming, labor-intensive, but exponentially stronger than fence. We started on the west side, where the old brick warehouse provided some natural cover. Marcus operated the crane with the precision that made him invaluable. Each I-beam weighed roughly half a ton, and setting them required coordination. One guy guiding the beam from the crane hook, others steadying it as it lowered into position. Someone operating the excavator we'd modified into a pile driver to pound the beams deep enough for stability. By noon, we had 6 beams positioned. The work was exhausting, dangerous, and necessary. Every crash of metal, every diesel engine roar, drew attention from outside. The things gathered wherever we worked closest to the perimeter, drawn by noise and movement like moths to flame. During a water break, Sketch approached me with his notebook again. "Boss, I've been thinking about the long game. If we're here for weeks or months, we need more than walls. We need systems." Systems. Water collection. The building foundation we'd already poured has exposed rebar and drainage channels. We could rig up rain collection, food production. I know it sounds crazy, but we've got soil, sunlight, and that greenhouse sheeting for the atrium section. We could grow stuff. And power? The generators are good, but fuel won't last forever. We were going to install solar panels on the roof. They're still in crates. I stared at the kid. You're talking about turning this construction site into a permanent settlement. I'm talking about surviving, he said quietly. However long it takes. He wasn't wrong. The supplies we had might stretch 2 weeks with strict rationing. Then what? We either ventured out into whatever hellscape existed beyond our walls, or we found ways to sustain ourselves here. Keep planning, I told him. If we're still here in a week, we'll start on the infrastructure. The days blurred into a rhythm of brutal labor and constant vigilance. We completed the north fence repair by day 3, ugly but functional wall of welded steel that sealed the gap. By day 7, we'd erected proper metal walls along the entire west and north perimeters. The east and south sides still relied on jersey barriers and reinforced fence. But we were making progress. The things outside never left. They congregated in groups, sometimes dozens deep, pressing against whatever barriers we'd built. We learned their patterns. They were more active at night, more sluggish during the day. Loud noises attracted them. Movement caught their attention, but they had no strategy, no ability to problem solve. They couldn't climb smooth surfaces. They couldn't work together. They were hunger and instinct wrapped in rotting flesh. We also learned they were dangerous even in death. On day 9, one of them somehow squeezed through a gap in the south fence we hadn't noticed, a section where a jersey barrier had shifted slightly, leaving a narrow opening. It grabbed Marcus while he was working on the crane base. He reacted instantly, shoving it backward, but its teeth grazed his forearm, tearing fabric but not breaking skin. We put the thing down with a length of rebar through its skull, then spent 20 minutes examining Marcus's arm, terrified we'd see a bite. The graze left bruising and a scratch, but no puncture. We cleaned it with every antiseptic in the first aid kit anyway. If I turn into one of those things, Marcus said calmly, you put me down fast. No hesitation. You're not infected, Tommy insisted. But if I am, we all nodded. It became an unspoken agreement among the crew. If you got bit, you said so immediately, and you accepted what came next. Survival of the group outweighed the individual. Fortunately, Marcus stayed human, but we sealed that south fence gap with extreme prejudice and added daily perimeter checks to our routine. I know you're wondering how 12 guys held it together while the world fell apart around them. Stay with me, because the next part changes everything about what we thought we were building. Drop a like and subscribe if you haven't yet. By week 3, our fortress was taking recognizable shape. The west and north walls stood solid, 8 feet of steel sheeting backed by I-beam supports, anchored deep enough that even vehicle impact wouldn't topple them. We'd started on the east wall, and the south wall was framed out waiting for sheeting. But walls were just the beginning. Sketch's infrastructure plans became our blueprint for long-term survival. We'd rigged rain collection using tarps and PVC piping, channeling water into the empty cement mixer drum we'd cleaned out and converted into a storage tank. Not perfect, but it gave us a renewable water source beyond our dwindling bottled supply. The solar panel installation was Tommy's obsession. We had 20 commercial-grade panels still in their crates, originally meant for the office building's roof. He spent 4 days studying the wiring diagrams, then another 3 getting them mounted on top of the trailers and connected to the generator system. The first time we got power flowing from the sun instead of our finite diesel fuel, he actually cheered. We can run lights, charge tools, maybe even keep the fridge going, he said, grinning like a kid. Fuel was our death clock. Now we've bought time. Food remained our critical vulnerability. By week 4, we'd exhausted the vending machines and most of the canned goods. Rationing had us down to roughly 1,200 calories per person per day, enough to function, not enough to sustain heavy labor indefinitely. We need a supply run, Marcus said during our evening meeting. We'd started holding these every night. 12 of us gathered in the break trailer, discussing problems and plans. There's a grocery distribution warehouse 8 blocks north. I delivered there for a side job couple years back. Big place, probably well stocked if it hasn't been completely looted. 8 blocks through hostile territory, I said. That's a suicide mission on foot. So we don't go on foot. We take the excavator. That got everyone's attention. Pavel leaned forward. You want to drive an excavator through city streets full of those things? It's armored glass, fully enclosed cab, weighs 25 tons, and moves at about 4 miles per hour. Nothing's stopping it, and nothing's getting inside. We load supplies into the bucket, drive back. The logic was sound, if insane. We debated for an hour, weighing risks against the mathematical certainty that our food would run out in less than 2 weeks. Finally, I made the call. We go, but not alone. We take 2 excavators. Marcus drives lead, I drive second. If one breaks down or gets stuck, the other can assist. We go at dawn, move fast as those machines allow, and we don't stop for anything that isn't a complete roadblock. 6 others come as security and loading crew, riding in the excavator buckets. Rest, stay here, and maintain the fort. We spent the next day preparing, fueled both excavators to capacity, loaded tools, weapons, mostly construction implements like pry bars and sledgehammers, since none of us owned guns, and empty containers for supplies. Mapped the route on a street map someone had in their truck, marking alternate paths if the main roads were impassable. That night, I barely slept. The mission felt necessary and reckless in equal measure. Dawn broke gray and drizzling. Marcus and I climbed into our respective excavators, while Tommy, Pavel Sketch, and 3 others, guys named Derek, Carlos, and an older equipment operator everyone called Pops, positioned themselves in the buckets, hanging onto the hydraulic arms. Radio check, I said into the walkie-talkie. Loud and clear, Marcus replied from the lead excavator. We'd removed enough of the south wall to create an exit point, planning to seal it with a mobile barrier once we returned. The crew remaining behind would monitor from the elevated platform we'd built on the crane base, our makeshift watchtower. Open it up, I called. They swung the barrier section aside. Beyond our walls, the street was a graveyard of abandoned vehicles and shambling figures. Dozens of them, maybe more, spread across the visible area. Marcus's excavator rumbled forward. The things noticed immediately, turning toward the sound, converging from all directions. The first one reached the excavator and grabbed at the treads. The machine rolled over it without slowing, treads pulping flesh and bone with mechanical indifference. I followed, my excavator pushing through the growing crowd. Bodies crunched under the treads. The things clawed at the cab, smearing the glass with blood and rot, but couldn't penetrate. Inside the enclosed cabin, I was untouchable. The guys in my bucket weren't as protected. They had to duck and swing pry bars at any that got too close, but the height advantage kept them mostly safe. We turned north onto Madison Avenue. The street was a chaos frozen in time. Cars abandoned mid-flight, some with doors hanging open, others crashed into storefronts or each other. Bodies lay everywhere, some moving, most not. We navigated around the worst obstructions, using the excavator arms to shove vehicles aside when necessary. 3 blocks in, we hit our first real problem. A delivery truck had jackknifed across the entire street, blocking both lanes. Behind it, a fire had burned through several buildings, leaving rubble collapsed into the roadway. Can't push through, Marcus radioed. Too much debris. Alternate route. Take Kimball Street west 1 block, then north again. Kimball was narrower, lined with parked cars on both sides, leaving barely enough room for the excavators. The things followed our noise, an ever-growing parade of rot and hunger trailing behind us. Some were fresh enough to run, throwing themselves at the machines with frantic desperation. Others were so decomposed they fell apart under the treads, leaving smears of unidentifiable organic matter. 2 more blocks. 4. 6. The warehouse finally came into view, a massive concrete structure with loading docks and minimal windows. The front entrance was blocked by a wall of abandoned trucks, but the loading dock area was accessible. There, Marcus said, pointing with his excavator arm. We maneuvered into the dock area. The loading bay doors were closed but not secured. Marcus used his bucket to pry one open, metal shrieking in protest. Inside was darkness. Lights, I ordered. We positioned both excavators to shine their work lights into the warehouse interior. Rows of industrial shelving stretched into shadows, stacked with pallets of goods. And standing among them, maybe 50 of those things, warehouse workers and delivery drivers who'd turned when the infection hit. They noticed our lights immediately and began shambling toward the entrance. "We need to clear them out," Tommy said, standing in the excavator bucket with his pry bar. "Can't load supplies safely with them inside." What followed was brutal, methodical slaughter. We used the excavators as weapons, swinging the bucket arms to sweep the things aside, crushing them against shelving and walls. The guys on foot worked in pairs, staying near the excavator protection, putting down anything that got too close. It took 30 minutes to clear enough space to work safely. Then we loaded. Cases of canned goods, boxes of dried food, jugs of water, first aid supplies, batteries, anything useful. The excavator buckets could hold maybe a ton each, and we filled them to capacity. Tommy found a pallet of sports drinks and another of protein bars that became his personal obsession to bring back. "One more load," Marcus said. "We've got room." "Too risky," I replied. "We've been here almost 2 hours. Let's get what we have back to the fort." The return trip was slower. The excavators weighted down with supplies in the streets, now fully aware of our presence. The things converged from every direction, hundreds of them, creating a wall of bodies we had to push through. The treads clogged with flesh, the machines overheated from the constant strain, but we kept moving, grinding forward foot by foot. When we finally reached our fort, the remaining crew had the entrance open and ready. We rolled inside, and they sealed the barrier behind us immediately. I climbed out of the excavator cab, legs shaking from adrenaline dump, and looked at the supplies we'd risked everything to retrieve. 2 weeks, Tommy said, doing quick math. Maybe 3 if we're careful. We just bought ourselves time. The crew unloaded in silence, everyone too exhausted for celebration. But that night, we ate better than we had in weeks, and for the first time since the world ended, I felt something like hope. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were adapting. The supply run changed something fundamental in how we saw ourselves. We weren't just construction workers hiding behind walls anymore. We were operators, survivors who could venture into the dead world and take what we needed. That confidence was dangerous, but it was also necessary. By week 6, our fortress had evolved beyond anything I'd imagined that first chaotic day. The perimeter walls stood complete on all sides, 8 feet of welded steel sheeting that could withstand anything short of explosive force. We'd added a catwalk along the interior wall, elevated platforms accessible by ladder, allowing patrol routes with clear sightlines over the barriers. The crane base had become our primary watchtower, reinforced and expanded with scavenged materials, until it could hold 4 people comfortably, with supplies and equipment. Sketch's infrastructure projects consumed our daylight hours. The rain collection system now fed into 3 separate storage drums, giving us roughly 200 gallons of capacity. We'd tested the water and found it safe enough after running it through improvised filters made from sand, gravel, and activated charcoal Pavel had extracted from the air filtration systems. Not perfect, but nobody had gotten sick yet. The solar panels provided enough power for basic needs: lights during evening hours, tool charging, the refrigeration unit we'd salvaged from the warehouse run and repaired. Tommy had become obsessed with electrical efficiency. creating charts tracking our power generation versus consumption, adjusting usage to maximize our battery reserves. But the real game changer was the greenhouse. We directed it along the east wall using the translucent polymer sheeting originally meant for the office building's atrium skylights. Sketch had designed a frame from scrap lumber and metal studs, creating an enclosed space roughly 30 feet by 15 feet. Inside, we'd built raised beds from plywood and filled them with topsoil we'd excavated from the building foundation. "It's not much," Sketch admitted, showing me the first sprouts emerging from the soil on day 43. Lettuce, tomatoes, beans, fast-growing stuff from seeds we found at a garden center 3 blocks over. Won't feed 12 people, but it supplements. I looked at the tiny green shoots pushing through dark earth and something caught in my chest. Life, growing in the middle of all this death. "It's everything," I told him. The kid ducked his head, embarrassed, but I saw him smile. Our daily routine had solidified into something almost normal. Morning watch shift change at dawn. Breakfast, rationed but adequate now that we managed our supplies carefully. Work details assigned based on priority. Wall maintenance, equipment repair, infrastructure improvement, supply inventory, perimeter patrol. Lunch was our main meal, usually something hot if fuel allowed. Afternoon work continued until the light faded. Evening meetings to discuss problems and plans. Dinner, typically cold food to conserve fuel. Watch rotation through the night in 4-hour shifts. We'd survived 2 months, 63 days since the world ended. Then the others arrived. I was on morning watch with Carlos, both of us on the crane tower, when movement caught my attention on the western approach. Not the shambling, disjointed motion of the infected. This was purposeful, coordinated. People. Living people. "Boss, you seeing this?" Carlos asked, already reaching for the binoculars. Through the lenses, I counted 7 figures moving carefully through the ruins, staying low, avoiding the scattered infected that wandered the streets. They were armed. I saw what looked like hunting rifles, a shotgun, various improvised weapons. They moved, like they'd been surviving for a while, checking corners, covering each other's movement. They were heading directly toward our fortress. "Wake everyone," I told Carlos, quietly. "Get them to defensive positions." He scrambled down the tower ladder while I kept watch. The group had stopped about a block away, taking cover behind an overturned delivery van. One of them, a guy with a thick beard and a rifle, was studying our walls through his own binoculars. They'd found us. Now I had to decide what that meant. By the time the strangers reached our south wall, my entire crew was positioned and ready. We'd never discussed protocols for encountering other survivors. But everyone had instinctively taken defensive stances, some on the catwalks with tools that could double as weapons, others near the excavators ready to use the machines if things went bad. The bearded guy stopped about 30 feet from our wall and raised his hands, showing empty palms. "Hey in there," he called out. "We're not looking for trouble, just want to talk." I climbed to the top of the catwalk where he could see me. "Talk from there. What do you want?" "Name's Griffin. We've been surviving in the metro tunnels about a mile east. Saw your walls, heard your equipment running. Impressive setup you've got. We're looking to trade." "Trade what?" "Information, supplies, security cooperation. There's more people alive than you might think. Small groups scattered around the city. Some good, some not so much. We've been trying to organize, create trade networks, maybe eventually clear some sectors. Your construction equipment could be valuable for a lot of projects." Marcus appeared beside me on the catwalk, keeping his voice low. "Could be legit. Could be a con to get inside and take what we have." "I know." I raised my voice to Griffin again. "You said some groups aren't so good. Explain." Griffin glanced at his companions, then back to me. "There's a crew operating out of the old industrial district. Call themselves the Foremen. Yeah, I see the irony given your setup. About 20 guys, well armed, aggressive. They've been raiding smaller survivor groups, taking supplies and equipment. Heard they're looking for your site specifically. Someone saw your excavators on that warehouse run last month. That was not what I wanted to hear. Why would they come after us? Because you've got what everyone needs. Heavy machinery, building materials, power generation, defensible position. In this new world, that makes you rich. And rich attracts predators. I studied Griffin's face, trying to read honesty versus manipulation. His group looked rough but not hostile. Tired people wearing mismatched gear, carrying weapons like they knew how to use them but weren't eager to. Behind them, a woman with short, dark hair was keeping watch on their rear approach, professional and alert. "Let's say I believe you," I called down. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Let us in. We share information about the area, where supplies are, which sectors are clear, which have heavy infected concentrations. We tell you about other survivor groups, potential allies and threats. In exchange, maybe we work out a deal where you help clear some roadways with your equipment, or assist with building projects for a larger survivor community we're trying to establish. You want to recruit us. I want us all to survive. Alone, small groups get picked off or run out of supplies. Together, we might actually rebuild something." Tommy had climbed up beside Marcus and me. "Boss, we don't know these people. Could be scouts for this foreman gang they're talking about." "Could be," I agreed. "Griffin, you and one other can come in. Rest of your people stay out there. We'll talk, you'll answer questions, and then we decide if there's anything to discuss. Deal?" He consulted with his group briefly, then nodded. "Fair enough. I'll bring Sarah. She's our logistics person. Knows the area better than anyone." We opened a section of the south wall, just wide enough for two people to slip through, and let Griffin and the woman named Sarah inside. They entered with visible caution, hands away from weapons, eyes taking in everything. I saw Sarah's gaze linger on the solar panels, the crane tower, the greenhouse structure. "You've built something real here," she said quietly. "Most survivors are just hiding and scrounging. You're actually building infrastructure." We led them to the brake trailer. Marcus, Tommy, Pavel, Sketch and I sat across from Griffin and Sarah, while the rest of the crew maintained watch positions. I'd told everyone to stay alert but not provocative. We needed information, but we also needed to project strength. Griffin spread a hand-drawn map across the table. It showed the downtown area in crude detail, marked with symbols and notations. "This is what we know. Red marks are heavy infected zones. Avoid completely. Yellow are risky but passable during daylight. Green are relatively clear. Blue marks are survivor groups we've made contact with." I counted 12 blue marks scattered across the map. That many, that we know of. Probably more hiding in basements and high-rises. Most groups are small, 3 to 8 people. Largest is a community that's taken over a high school about 2 miles north, maybe 40 people total. They've got numbers, but not much else. Sarah pointed to a black mark southwest of our position. "That's the foreman territory, industrial sector, lots of warehouses and factories. They've fortified a truck depot, plenty of vehicles, fuel, weapons. Their leader is a guy named Keller, ex-military, smart, ruthless. He's been consolidating power, forcing smaller groups to either join him or get raided." "Forced recruitment," Marcus said. "Slavery by another name. Essentially, they hit a group sheltering in an apartment complex 2 weeks ago, killed anyone who resisted, took their supplies, burned them out. 6 people dead over some canned food and bottled water. The room went quiet. This was the reality we'd been insulated from behind our walls. Human predators were more dangerous than infected ones because they could think, plan, and organize." "Why haven't they hit you yet?" Tommy asked. "If you're organizing other groups, you'd be a threat." "We're mobile," Griffin explained. Metro tunnels give us access to most of the city without surface exposure. We don't stay in one place long enough to become a target. But you, he gestured around, you've built a fixed position, visible, valuable. Eventually, they'll come for it. Let them come, Pavel said. We've got walls and heavy equipment. They've got numbers and actual firearms, Sarah countered. Maybe explosives, too. There was a construction supply warehouse in their sector that had demolition materials. You're tough, but are you tough enough to withstand a coordinated assault? I didn't answer immediately because I didn't know. We'd been focused on infected threats and basic survival, not tactical defense against organized human attackers. Our walls would slow them down, but determined people with guns and explosives could eventually breach our perimeter. If you've ever realized your fortress might become your tomb, you'll understand the cold fear that settled in my gut right then. Comment below what you'd do in this situation, and smash that subscribe button, because the next decision changed everything. All right, I said finally. Assume we believe you, and assume we care about this threat. What are you proposing specifically? Griffin leaned forward. Join the network. Share resources and information. We help each other defend against threats like the foreman. Maybe coordinate to take them down before they get strong enough to overrun everyone. Your equipment could be the difference. Imagine clearing streets, building fortified supply routes, creating connected safe zones instead of isolated pockets. In exchange for what? Marcus asked. You want access to our site? Use of our equipment? Partnership, Sarah said, not ownership. We bring you intelligence, additional manpower when needed, access to supplies and skills from other groups. One community has a doctor. Another has someone who worked water treatment. He's been helping groups establish clean water systems. You've got construction expertise and equipment. Together, we're stronger than separate. It was a compelling pitch, and I suspected that was exactly why I distrusted it. These people were strangers offering solutions that seemed too convenient. But they'd also provided specific information that felt genuine. The map, the details about the foreman, the tactical assessment of our vulnerabilities. We need to discuss this privately, I told them. You wait here. Food and water if you want it, but you stay in this trailer until we decide. Griffin nodded. Understood. Take your time. We left Carlos and Derek to watch them, friendly but armed with pry bars, and gathered outside near the excavators. My crew formed a tight circle, everyone talking over each other until I held up a hand for silence. Opinions, one at a time. Tommy, you first. Don't trust them completely, but I don't think they're lying either. That map has details you couldn't fake easily. And the logic about a larger gang eventually coming for us makes sense. Marcus, risk versus reward. If they're legitimate, having allies and intelligence is huge. If they're scouts for the foreman, we just showed them our defenses. But they've seen the walls from outside anyway, so that information isn't new. I say cautious engagement. Pavel, in my country, when times are bad, you trust family first, neighbors second, strangers never. But these are strange times. Sometimes stranger is all you have. I think we test them. Small cooperation. See if they deliver what they promise. Others voiced similar sentiments, cautious willingness to explore partnership without full commitment. Even Sketch, usually quiet in these discussions, spoke up. If there really are other survivors trying to rebuild instead of just raid, shouldn't we be part of that? I mean, what's the point of surviving if we're just going to live behind walls forever? Scared of everyone? The idealism again. But he had a point. We'd built something functional here. Maybe even sustainable short term. But long term? We needed more than 12 people in one fortified construction site. We needed community, trade, specialized skills we didn't have. Here's what we do, I decided. We tell them yes to information sharing and limited cooperation. No access to the interior of our site yet. No use of our equipment yet. They provide intelligence. We verify it independently. If they're legitimate, and if this network actually exists, then we discuss deeper partnership. But we also prepare for the worst. Assume the four men are real and coming, and we build defenses accordingly. Agreed? Everyone nodded. We returned to the trailer and presented the terms to Griffin and Sarah. They accepted without hesitation, which either meant they were genuinely interested in partnership or were excellent manipulators playing a long game. We let them leave with promises to return in 3 days with more information. As they disappeared back into the ruins beyond our walls, Tommy voiced what we were all thinking. That was either the best decision we've made or the worst. 3 days to find out, I said. We spent those 3 days preparing for war. If the four men were real and coming for us, our walls wouldn't be enough. We needed strategic advantages, multiple defensive layers, fallback positions, ways to leverage our unique resources. The crew worked with renewed intensity. We repositioned both bulldozers near the entrances, ready to act as mobile barriers or battering rams if needed. Pavel designed and built spiked barricades from rebar, nasty obstacles that would channel any attack into predetermined kill zones. We stockpiled projectiles on the catwalks, chunks of concrete, metal debris, anything heavy we could drop on attackers. Sketch proposed something radical on day 2. The crane, he said, pointing at the massive machine dominating our site. It's our biggest asset and our biggest vulnerability. If someone captures it, they can drop the wrecking ball on our own defenses or use it to breach the walls from inside. We need to either disable it completely or turn it into a weapon. How do you weaponize a construction crane? Tommy asked skeptically. Mount the wrecking ball on a quick-release mechanism. If attackers breach the walls, we swing it like a pendulum into the entry points. A 2-ton steel ball moving at speed will destroy anything in its path. People, vehicles, whatever. It was dark, brutal, and brilliant. We spent 8 hours rigging the system, testing the release mechanism until Pavel was satisfied it would work reliably. The crane became our last resort defensive weapon, a literal hammer we could bring down on anyone who made it through our outer defenses. On the 3rd night, Griffin and Sarah returned as promised, this time with 3 others from their group. They carried supplies, antibiotics, fresh batteries, canned food, as goodwill offerings. And they brought information. The 4 men are mobilizing, Griffin reported, his face grim. They hit another survivor group yesterday, a family hiding in a restaurant. Took everything, burned the place. We heard radio chatter about them asking around for the construction fortress. They're looking for you, and they're close to figuring out exactly where you are. How long do we have? I asked. Days, maybe a week. Keller's cautious. He'll scout before committing to an assault. But once he decides to move, he'll come hard. 20-plus fighters, rifles, possibly explosives. Sarah spread out another map, this one showing approach routes to our site. If they're smart, they'll hit from multiple sides simultaneously. Your south entrance is the obvious target, but I'd expect diversionary attacks on the east and west walls too. They'll try to overwhelm your response, get you disorganized. Marcus studied the map. We've got 12 people, they've got 20. Even with defensive advantage, those are bad odds. Not if you have backup, Griffin said. I've contacted the other groups in the network. 6 have agreed to send people to help defend your position. Between them and us, that's another 18 fighters. We'd arrive the night before the expected attack, help you prepare, coordinate defense. Why? I asked bluntly. Why would they risk their people for us? Because if the foremen take this site, they'll have everything they need to dominate the entire area. Your equipment, your supplies, your strategic position, they'll be unstoppable. But if we stop them here, together, we break their momentum. Maybe even break them permanently. It was strategy, not altruism. These groups wanted to protect themselves by protecting us. That made sense in a way pure charity wouldn't have. Enlightened self-interest, I could believe. And if we say no to the help? Tommy asked. Then you fight alone, probably lose, and the foremen eventually come for the rest of us anyway, with all your resources added to their arsenal. We all lose, just slower. I looked at my crew, saw the same calculation happening behind their eyes. We could refuse help and probably die defending what we'd built, or we could accept alliance with strangers and maybe survive. They show up 2 nights from now, I said. We'll have positions prepared and a defensive plan. Your people follow our commands inside these walls. If anyone tries to take advantage during the chaos, we'll deal with them the same way we deal with the foremen. Clear? Crystal clear, Griffin agreed. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of preparation and tactical planning. We designated defensive positions, assigned sectors, created contingency plans for various breach scenarios. The guys from other survivor groups arrived after dark on the second night, 18 fighters of varying ages and capabilities, plus Griffin's original 7, 30 people total now inside our walls, triple our normal population. I gave them the orientation speech standing on the crane tower platform so everyone could hear. This is our home. We built it from nothing, and we'll defend it to the last. You're here because we have a common enemy. While you're inside these walls, we're allies. After this is done, we figure out what comes next. But tonight and tomorrow, we work together. Understood? A chorus of agreement rose from below. These weren't soldiers. They were survivors. Regular people who'd learned to fight because the world demanded it. A school teacher named Frank from the high school community. A woman named Jessie, who'd been a paramedic. A teenager who looked barely 18 but handled a hunting rifle with confidence. Each had their own survival story, their own reasons for being here. We assigned positions based on capabilities, experienced fighters to the catwalks and defensive positions, others to support roles, supply runners, medical assistants, communications. Marcus would coordinate the west wall. Tommy had the east. Pavel took the north. I'd command from the crane tower with a roaming role to respond to emerging threats. Griffin's intelligence proved accurate. The scouts appeared the next morning, 2 men watching our walls from the ruins across the street, making notes, taking photographs with a camera that had survived the apocalypse. They didn't try to hide, didn't care if we saw them. That arrogance told me everything about their confidence. They're planning the assault for tonight, Sarah said, watching the scouts through binoculars. That's standard, scout in the morning, plan in the afternoon, attack after dark. Then we don't wait for night, I said. We hit them first. That got everyone's attention. Marcus shook his head. Boss, we don't know where their base is exactly, and they've got numbers. I'm not talking about attacking their base. I'm talking about attacking their approach. Griffin, your map showed 3 likely routes they'd use to mass forces near us. We take the excavators and bulldozers, block those routes with vehicles and debris, turn their approach corridors into mazes they have to navigate slowly while fully exposed, take away their ability to mass forces and hit us simultaneously. Sketch was nodding enthusiastically. Guerrilla construction. Use our equipment advantage before the fight even starts. I love it. It's risky, Sarah warned. You'll be exposed outside the walls. Risk versus reward, I said, repeating Marcus's earlier words. We do nothing. They hit us on their terms. We do this. We dictate the battlefield. We assembled 4 teams, 2 excavators, 2 bulldozers, each with a crew of 3. The plan was simple. Drive to the key intersections Griffin had identified. Use the machines to create obstacles that would funnel and delay any assault force, then return before dark, fast, aggressive, and hopefully unexpected. I took one of the bulldozers with Carlos and Sketch. Marcus led the other bulldozer team. Pavel and Tommy commanded the excavators. We rolled out of our fortress at noon, leaving Griffin and the remaining defenders to hold the walls. The city felt different in daylight, less immediately threatening but more melancholy, abandoned lives everywhere you looked. Children's toys scattered on sidewalks, cars with family photos still hanging from rearview mirrors. The infected were fewer during the day, sluggish and easier to avoid. We reached the first intersection, a major crossroads 8 blocks south that offered direct access to our site. I positioned the bulldozer and started pushing abandoned vehicles into a massive barrier across the street. Sketch and Carlos worked outside the machine, directing me and securing the obstacles with chains and cables so they couldn't be easily moved. 20 minutes of work created a wall of crushed metal and concrete that would take hours to clear even with heavy equipment. We repeated the process at 2 more intersections, each time building obstacles that transformed open approaches into narrow, exposed channels. The other teams completed their assignments too. By 4 p.m., we'd reshaped the battlefield surrounding our fortress. Anyone attacking now would have to navigate a maze of blocked streets and dead ends, moving slowly through kill zones we could defend with concentrated fire and dropped obstacles. We made it back inside the walls just as the sun touched the horizon. The infected were beginning their nightly surge, congregating in larger groups, becoming more aggressive. Behind us, the city settled into familiar darkness, punctuated by distant fires and the eternal moaning of the dead. "They'll figure out what we did pretty quick," Tommy said. "Might make them cautious, or angry enough to attack anyway," Marcus countered. "We'd know soon enough." Everyone took positions as night fell completely. The wait began. They came at 11 p.m., not with stealth, but with overwhelming force and noise. Headlights appeared on multiple approach routes, trucks and vehicles roaring through the streets. They hit our obstacles and the confusion was immediate. We heard shouting, engines revving in frustration, the grinding crash of vehicles trying to ram through our barriers. "Positions," I shouted from the crane tower. "Wait for clear targets." The first attackers appeared on foot, having abandoned their vehicles to navigate around our obstacles. Maybe 10 of them, carrying rifles and wearing mismatched gear that suggested military surplus. They opened fire on our south wall, bullets sparking off the steel sheeting. Our defenders returned fire, not with guns, which we still mostly lacked, but with projectiles. Chunks of concrete and metal rained down from the catwalks, forcing the attackers to scatter and seek cover. One went down hard, struck by a 20-pound piece of rebar. The others retreated to regroup. "East wall taking fire," Tommy's voice crackled over the radio. 5 or 6 shooters, staying distant. "Hold position," I ordered. "Don't waste ammunition on shots you can't make." The second wave hit harder. 15 attackers on the south approach, coordinated and aggressive. They brought a vehicle-mounted spotlight that blazed against our walls, blinding anyone who looked directly at it. Gunfire intensified, not random shots, but concentrated volleys aimed at our catwalk positions, forcing defenders to stay low. "They're trying to suppress us," Marcus reported, "getting ready for a breach attempt." He was right. Through the glare of the spotlight, I saw figures moving up with equipment, cutting torches and pry bars, heading for our wall. If they opened a gap, the whole defensive line could collapse. "Pavel, north wall status?" I radioed. "Quiet here. No activity. Leave skeleton crew. Bring everyone else to the south wall. We're about to have a breach." A cutting torches lit up like orange stars against our steel sheeting. They were working on the seam where 2 panels met, trying to separate them. Our defenders dropped everything they could reach, but the spotlight made it impossible to aim accurately without exposing themselves to gunfire. "Time for the bulldozer," I said to myself, then keyed the radio. "Derek, you're up. Execute Plan Hammer." Derek was already in position, sitting in one of the bulldozers we'd kept mobile inside the perimeter. He fired it up and drove directly at the interior of the south wall, blade raised. The attackers outside heard the engine roar and realized what was coming, but too late. Derek slammed the bulldozer into the wall from inside, right where they were cutting. The impact was catastrophic. 3 tons of machine hitting the wall at full speed turned the steel panels into a concussion weapon. The attackers working on the seam were crushed or thrown backward by the shockwave. Their cutting equipment scattered. The breach attempt failed completely. Gunfire intensified in response. Now they were just angry, pouring rounds into our defenses. But bullets couldn't breach steel walls, and we had the ultimate defensive advantage: height, cover, and prepared positions. West wall," Sarah's voice screamed over the radio. "They're coming over the warehouse." I'd forgotten about the old brick warehouse that abutted our west wall. The attackers had climbed to its roof and were now attempting to drop down into our fortress from above, bypassing the walls entirely. Smart and terrifying. "Marcus, respond west wall, now. Griffin, your people with him." I saw figures appearing on the warehouse roofline, silhouetted against the night sky. They had ropes, preparing to rappel down. If even 5 of them made it inside, we'd be fighting in close quarters with trained killers while under fire from outside. Sketch appeared beside me on the crane tower. "Boss, the crane weapon. It's positioned toward the west interior. We can sweep the drop zone. There are friendlies moving that direction. Then we wait until they clear, and we sweep. It's the only way." He was right. I grabbed the radio. "Marcus, Griffin, clear the west interior now. Move south away from the warehouse wall. You've got 30 seconds. What? Why? Do it." I saw them scatter, understanding the urgency if not the reason. The first attackers had already rappelled down, 4 of them inside our walls, firing at anything that moved. They were good, professional movements, coordinated fields of fire. They'd take our fortress from the inside if we didn't stop them immediately. Sketch. Release on my mark. I waited until our people were clear of the impact zone. The attackers inside were advancing toward the trailers, not realizing what hung above them. Mark. Sketch yanked the release mechanism. The wrecking ball, positioned at maximum height and already swung toward the west wall, dropped free and swept down in a deadly arc. 2 tons of steel moving at terminal velocity hit the drop zone like a meteor strike. The impact was absolute. 2 attackers died instantly, simply erased by the collision. The third was caught by the edge of the ball's arc and thrown 30 feet into the west wall hard enough to leave a dent in the steel. The fourth survived only because he'd been slightly ahead of the impact point, but the shockwave and debris knocked him down. Pavel emerged from the darkness and finished him with a length of rebar through the chest. Brutal, necessary, final. The attack faltered after that. We'd broken their momentum, killed or injured maybe a third of their force, and demonstrated defensive capabilities they hadn't anticipated. The gunfire tapered off, then stopped. Engines roared in the distance as they retreated, leaving their dead behind. We'd won. But I knew this was just round 1. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, drop a comment telling me how you'd defend against round 2. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened next tested everything we'd built and everyone we'd trusted. We didn't celebrate the victory. There wasn't time, and it didn't feel like winning, just surviving another night. The crew spent the hours until dawn reinforcing damaged sections of wall, treating injuries and counting costs. 2 of Griffin's people had taken bullets, one through the shoulder, another grazed across the ribs. Jessie, the paramedic, worked on them with our limited medical supplies, her hands steady despite the circumstances. The bodies outside our walls told the story. 7 confirmed dead attackers, maybe more injured who'd been carried away during the retreat. We'd killed people, living, thinking humans, and that weight sat heavy on everyone, even though we'd had no choice. "They'll be back," Griffin said. joining me on the crane tower at dawn. Keller doesn't accept losses like this. He'll regroup, get more people, come harder. How long? Depends how many people he can rally. Last night's failure will make recruitment harder. Nobody wants to join a losing fight. But it'll also make him desperate to recover his reputation. I looked out at the city, slowly revealing itself in gray morning light. Somewhere out there, an angry warlord was planning our destruction. Behind me, exhausted people were trying to patch walls and catch a few hours of sleep. This wasn't sustainable. "What if we don't wait for him to come back?" I said quietly. Griffin looked at me sharply. "You're talking about offense. I'm talking about ending this. Your intelligence is good. You know where his base is, how it's defended. We've got advantages he doesn't expect. Heavy equipment, defensive experience, people who'll fight harder because we're defending something we built instead of just taking what others have. We take the fight to him. We end the foremen as a threat. That's a war, not a raid. We're already in a war. Might as well win it." The idea was insane, desperate, and somehow inevitable. We'd built a fortress to survive, but survival wasn't enough anymore. As long as the foreman existed, we'd be perpetually under siege, unable to expand or trade or build anything beyond our walls. Either we eliminated the threat, or we lived in fear until they eventually overwhelmed us. I called a meeting for later that morning, after people had rested. All 30 fighters gathered in the central yard, sitting on equipment and supply crates. I laid out the proposal without embellishment. "The foremen will keep coming until we're dead or they're broken. We can wait behind these walls and hope we get lucky, or we can take the fight to them. I'm proposing we do the latter, a coordinated assault on their base using our equipment advantages and the element of surprise. It's dangerous. People might die, but it ends the threat permanently." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Frank the schoolteacher spoke up. "I came here to help defend a position, not to assault a fortified base. That's not what I signed up for." "None of us signed up for any of this," Marcus countered. "World ended, and we adapted. This is just more adaptation." "This is suicide," someone else argued. "They've got numbers, defensive positions, real weapons. We've got construction equipment and improvised tactics. We've got advantages they don't expect," Sketch said, standing up. His youth made him look even more out of place, but his voice was steady. "They think in terms of conventional combat guns, tactics, fortifications. We think in terms of construction and engineering. We can reshape the battlefield, create advantages they won't anticipate. We've already done it once." The debate continued for an hour. Some wanted to fortress up and wait. Others saw the logic of offensive action. Eventually, we voted, not democratic exactly, since it was still my call as leader of the original crew, but I wanted consensus. 22 voted to move forward with planning an assault. 8 voted to stay defensive. It was enough. Over the next 3 days, we planned Operation Sledgehammer, our name for the assault on the foreman base. Griffin's intelligence provided the foundation. The truck depot they occupied was a sprawling complex of warehouses and parking areas, surrounded by a concrete wall topped with chain-link fence. They had vehicles, fuel, weapons, and about 15 fighters remaining after our defensive battle. Their defenses were oriented toward repelling raids and infected, not a coordinated assault with heavy equipment. Our strategy was simple and brutal. Use the bulldozers to breach their perimeter wall, follow with excavators for mobile cover and offense, and storm the complex with our entire fighting force. Speed and aggression over caution. We'd hit them at dawn when they'd be least prepared, hopefully still recovering from their failed attack on us. Tommy created a timeline. Sketch designed the breach points based on satellite images Griffin had scavenged from an abandoned surveyor's office. Pavel prepared the equipment, armor plating welded to the bulldozer cabs for additional protection. modified buckets on the excavators that could act as battering rams. Marcus organized the assault teams and practiced the coordination we'd need. We left a skeleton crew of 5 to hold our fortress, people injured or unwilling to participate in offensive action. The other 25 would execute the assault. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I walked the perimeter, checking walls we might never return to, looking at the greenhouse where green sprouts continued growing oblivious to human violence. Sketch found me there around 2 a.m. Having second thoughts? He asked. Third and fourth thoughts. I'm about to lead people into battle. Real battle, not just defense. Some of them might not come back. Some of them definitely won't come back, Sketch said bluntly. But the alternative is waiting here until the 4 men come back stronger and overrun us anyway. At least this way we choose the terms. When did you get so comfortable with violence? He was quiet for a moment. I'm not comfortable. I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of living in fear forever, building walls instead of futures. If we break the 4 men, maybe we can start building something real, not just survival, actual civilization. The idealism again. But maybe that's what we needed. Someone still capable of imagining a future beyond the next crisis. We rolled out at 4 a.m., a convoy of monsters moving through dead streets. 2 bulldozers in front, 3 excavators behind, trucks carrying our fighters. The city was dark and quiet, except for the omnipresent moaning of infected scattered throughout the ruins. We navigated carefully, lights minimal, avoiding major groups of the dead. The 4-man base appeared as dawn broke, exactly as Griffin had described. Concrete walls, guard towers improvised from shipping containers, the sprawl of warehouses beyond. Lights burned inside, showing they had generator power. I could see 2 guards visible on the towers, but they looked bored, casual. They weren't expecting us. All teams, this is Hayes, I said into the radio. Execute Sledgehammer on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Both bulldozers surged forward, engines roaring from idle to full throttle in seconds. The guards noticed immediately, shouting and reaching for weapons, but it was far too late. The bulldozers hit the concrete wall doing 15 miles per hour, not fast by vehicle standards, but unstoppable for 40-ton machines with angled blades designed to move earth. The wall exploded inward, concrete fracturing and collapsing, chain-link fence tearing apart. The bulldozers didn't slow, driving straight into the complex, blades raised to push debris and any resistance out of the way. Gunfire erupted immediately, the 4 men responding with everything they had. Bullets sparked off the armored bulldozer cabs, but Pavel's welding held. The excavators followed through the breach, their buckets providing mobile cover for the fighters running behind. It was chaos, pure, violent chaos. The 4 men were scrambling, caught completely off guard by the assault. Some tried to organize a defensive line near the main warehouse. Others just ran, abandoning their positions. A few fought with desperate courage, making us pay for every foot of ground. Marcus led the left flank, his team clearing the warehouse row by row. Tommy took the right, pushing toward the vehicle depot where most of their resources were stored. I stayed mobile in one of the excavators, moving to wherever resistance was strongest, using the bucket as a shield for our fighters. A group of 4 men tried to flank us from a side building, and I swung the excavator arm like a weapon, the bucket crushing their cover and scattering them. Pavel followed in the bulldozer, literally pushing a shipping container over onto their position. The combination of construction equipment used as weapons was devastating. They had no tactics for this, no defense against machines that could reshape the battlefield in real time. The fight lasted 20 minutes that felt like hours. When it was over, the 4 men were broken, their leader Keller dead in the initial breach, most of his fighters killed or scattered, their base in ruins. We'd achieved total surprise and overwhelming force, turning their supposed advantages into nothing. But we'd paid the price. 4 of our people dead, including one of Griffin's original group and 2 from the high school community. 8 more injured, some seriously. The victory was absolute, but the cost was real. We spent 2 hours securing the base and gathering supplies. The 4 men had stockpiled impressive amounts of food, medicine, ammunition, and fuel, everything they'd raided from smaller groups. We loaded it all into their own trucks, claimed their weapons, and prepared to return home. As we drove back through the Dawn City, past the endless ruins and shambling infected, I felt something shift. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were builders, fighters, a community that could project power and defend itself. The fortress we'd started wasn't just walls. It was becoming something larger, something that might actually last. The crew waiting at our base cheered when we rolled through the gates, battered but victorious. The supplies we'd captured would sustain us for months. The weapons would make future defense easier, and most importantly, the threat that had hung over us was eliminated. That night, we held our first real gathering, not a tactical meeting or crisis response, but something almost like celebration. People shared food and stories, talking about what came next instead of just surviving today. Griffin's network groups were already discussing permanent alliance, possibly combining resources to create a larger settlement. Sketch found me on the crane tower again, looking out at the city. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it. We survived," I corrected. "That's not the same as winning. Maybe that's all winning looks like in this world." He might have been right. 6 months ago, I'd been a construction foreman building another useless office complex. Now I was leading a community of survivors in a fortress we'd built from nothing, having just fought and won a war against human predators. The world had ended, but we'd adapted, built, and fought for the right to keep building. The zombie epidemic had taken everything: civilization, safety, normalcy. But it hadn't taken our ability to create, to organize, to work together towards something beyond mere survival. We'd used construction equipment not to build the commercial world, but to build something that actually mattered: shelter in chaos, community in isolation, hope in despair. As I looked out at our fortress, walls standing strong, solar panels gleaming, greenhouse growing, people moving with purpose below, I felt something I hadn't felt since the first day the screaming started. Pride. We'd built this, not just the physical structure, but the idea that even at the end of the world, humans could still create instead of just destroy. That construction skills learned in a normal world could matter in an apocalypse. That 12 guys with heavy equipment and determination could build a future when everything said they should just wait to die. The fortress stood. We stood. And tomorrow, we'd keep building. Because that's what we do. That's who we are. Builders in the ruins, constructors of hope, foremen of the apocalypse. If this story moved you, if it made you think about survival and community and what really matters when everything falls apart, share it. Someone else needs to hear it. Someone else needs to know that even at the end of everything, we can still build.